Hello, and welcome to the third of 7 Cultivators Community Blitz events. I'm Jeff Montague, the community manager for the Cultivators community. It's a place where change makers, culture champions, and people who challenge the status quo come together to help each other bring their ideas to life at their respective workplaces. Today's event, let's do some, as is tradition now in our Cultivators community events. You can't have a community if you can't measure your community, and we are working on a new community intelligence engine called Unbury. It's going to help you clearly understand your community health and engagement metrics. One of the features of Unbury includes a community health score, which helps you compare to industry benchmarks. And one of the other cool things I'm really looking forward to is that you can set up custom reports. That's the last screen you were just looking at, based on your departmental or geographical or attendance information. So that is a product that will be coming soon to you. And now that you've all seen a little sneak peek of it, we can get started with the event. Okay, joining us today is our 2 seasoned veterans of the community development industry, Nichole Pfeiffer Hicks. Go ahead and give us a wave, Nichole. There, all right. And Julie Brickner. There you are, Julie. They have designed volunteer community recognition, appreciation, and motivation programs for multiple nationwide and global organizations, including the largest nonprofit fundraising event community, Relay for Life, for the American Cancer Society. They're going to share with us today a little bit about how they have worked or they are working on recognition programs or incentivizing action within from community members. While our discussion today, their primary expertise is in the nonprofit community space, and that'll be the primary example. I want to make sure everybody who's here, if you're in the for-profit world or the general community space, you should be able to recognize that the principles of community recognition, appreciation, apply no matter what your community type is. That's kind of our goal, is use that as the metaphor, but then recognize that. So we encourage everybody to speak up. This is a panel discussion. The 3 of us will, if we're talking and you're inspired to say something, feel free to come off mute, interrupt, talk. If you don't want to talk or you're in a position where you cannot talk, you can use chat. Molly is watching our chat. Molly can be your voice if I don't see it. So we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so Julie, I'm going to start with you with the topic of anytime any community manager is going to say, I want to develop a recognition program or incentive program or a badge program or something for my community. You have brought up to me in our preparations for this about the importance that you can't do it until you or unless you understand your audience.
That is 100% correct. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a good morning so far. I think, Jeff, as we've talked, and I've talked to a lot of people over the years, and even just recently in some of my local volunteer work that I'm doing, you have to know your audience. And as everyone knows, we're dealing with a lot of different generations that are either fundraising for us, recruiting for us, buying our product if we're a for-profit company. And so if you don't know what they need and you go in with the decision that I am going to go ahead and create an incentive program, then you're going to fail before you even get started. I think, the biggest thing that we need to look at is somebody that's a 75-year-old casual user of Facebook is going to be a completely different user and wants to be incentivized totally different than a 17-year-old in high school that is creating their own videos on TikTok. And so that's the first thing, know your audience. The second thing is know your competition. So if your competition, if they're giving incentives for $50 and you get a t-shirt, and you're creating a program that says you need to raise $500 to get a t-shirt, then maybe that's not such a big incentive. And then the last thing is everything that you thought you knew in 2019 and before, throw that out the window. It's completely different after the pandemic. I had a great conversation with Dr. Moser yesterday. He's a professor at the School of Business, University of Toledo. And I asked him, I said, what's changing in the buyers and the incentive market? And he said, the way we look at motivation, it's 100% different than we did in 2019. A couple of things that you need to think of. People are now, they want to be mission driven. or they want corporate social responsibility driven, which means any reward, any incentive, any badge, anything that we do to motivate people, it has to come from a place of that I'm giving back. Because if nothing else, in 2020, everyone realized very quickly we need to help each other. And so all the incentive programs, any motivation that we do for employees, volunteers, buyers, et cetera, has to come from a place of I'm giving back, because my dollars mean a lot to me now. So.
Yeah, and I wonder how many people, whether you're in the audience or Nichole, even, have you worked with for-profit companies who have internal workplace communities, or if anybody's a member of a workplace community, does your workplace community kind of pick a nonprofit or support multiple nonprofit? Is that a way that actually builds the community?
One of my clients now, CSR specifically, is like a huge way to bring together employees and motivate them in a different way. Gives them the power and the opportunity to give back in a way that feels meaningful, but also provides some, warm and fuzzies, plus some leadership recognition internally, while benefiting the community. It's a great way to really recognize folks intrinsically and extrinsically
and what they care about, right?
Yeah,
kind of shows your employees that you, as a company, you're listening to what they care about, and you're giving them an opportunity to act on that, right?
And and I just want to jump in, Jeff, and say incentive programs work. They 100% work. It's usually the hook. It gets people engaged. They see something they like, or it gets them to the next fundraising level. It gets them to the next volunteer level. It gets them, to stay 5 nights at a hotel so I can get my Hilton or Marriott points or whatever it is. So they work. The thing is, though, is that they have a shelf life of about 3 years. We live in a society, and just human nature in general. It's like, okay, been there, done that. What's the next incentive? So how are you speaking to people individually and collectively? And Nichole, you touched on it, intrinsically and extrinsically. The extrinsic is the whole, give me something cool. I raised $1,000, I get a neat jacket, or I stayed 5 nights, I get a free night stay. Okay, that's great. But intrinsically, how does it make me feel? And if you think about it, that whole carrot and stick approach, it starts when you're a little kid. And just the other day I had to laugh. My little great niece, 2.5 years old, being potty trained, she comes running out. I went potty. Where's my sticker? And I'm like, dear Lord, we're incentivizing, 2.5-year-olds already. And, so that's just in general, that's how human beings are. So what are we doing, though, to make people feel good about themselves so they inherently want to do good and want to be a part of our organization or our business, instead of always having to pay the money to do some kind of incentive? And that's why the feel-good incentives tend to work longer. They have a longer shelf life than the whole, here's your badge, here's a t-shirt, etc.
And Steve has posted in chat that incentive programs work. That's why Ohio is crushing their vaccination program right now. They're doing 5 $1 million giveaways. I'm about to move to Ohio.
No, stay away, Jeff.
That's for adults who get the vaccine, and then 5 full-time ride scholarships, college scholarships to teens who get the vaccine. I mean, so, again, in the context of, nonprofit communities, fundraising, reach a certain level, get a prize for that. That's your incentive. And other communities, it depends on what the community values, right? It depends on, if it's a workplace community, it might be sharing ideas. And so if somebody, if you have an employee who shares multiple ideas and one of those ideas catches fire, there should be an incentive for that, if that's the behavior you want, right? So you incentivize what you want your community members to do. Nichole, I'm going to ask you this question. I want to jump backwards just a little bit. We got into incentivization first, but with regard to understanding your audience, we had a really neat conversation about audience segmentation. And if there's anybody here who works either in marketing, email marketing specifically, traditionally, when we think of audience segmentation, we segment people based on their role or their title, or like what information's in the database. But when you and I were talking about knowing your audience, like if there's a way to communicate with your audience differently than that, you should, right?
Yeah, we talked about like thinking really differently in the way you segment them. So as you mentioned, Jeff, like traditionally the same email goes to all managers, for instance. And I'm not saying that you should not do that, because I think there's a time and a place. But when thinking about incentives, you kind of have to go back to the reason people are doing what they're doing and how you are going to get them there. And those internal drivers might be different. So there's a lot of value in spending some time sort of identifying if there's more creative, different ways to break down audiences to help target messages and communication that speaks to them, not just based on the traditional metrics or roles, but in ways that motivates them. Is it, one of the things that we know in the nonprofit world is, for example, that people participate in nonprofits, number one, because they're passionate about the cause of the nonprofit. The second is to meet new people. And the third is skill development. So if you look at it from that lens of like skill development, maybe there's a way that you could segment your audience based on the skill development thing that they would like to reach, right? So maybe it's providing, like talking to somehow collecting the data around, would you like to do more public speaking? Would you like to learn how to lead or communicate better with your team? And then try to parse out your communications based on those specific things that the people, the individuals themselves want to get out of it.
I like that. Yeah, because, and I think that even applies. I like that you brought that up, that, mission, networking, and skills development. Mm-hmm. I would go so far as to say that that's why people join every community, any community, right? Because your mission for a nonprofit, that's an easy thing to understand, but also the mission of whatever that community is. If it's, your workplace community has a mission, your hobby community has a mission. And of course, I want to find other people who like the same things that I like, right? And then I want to develop my skills within the context of that space. So yeah, if you were to communicate to all the people who said, I'd like to host events for the community, then you have your event host group of people that you're going to talk to about hosting events. That's really neat. I like that. And then again, if anybody in the audience has any thoughts to share, you can come off mute. You can type in chat. So now let's jump though to online versus offline recognition, and whether it's incentive program or just general recognition type stuff. Julie or Nichole, either one of you, because you both worked in the ACS space with Relay for Life, there were some tangible offline things that were offered to volunteers based on their status, their role, their performance within the community. You want to share any of that with the audience? So like survivor medals and the things about the event. Julie.
So I will. Yes. Thank you. So it's not only with the American Cancer Society, even local work I'm doing now with, my church, we're finding that anytime you can offer something just that means something to someone, you're going to get income and volunteerism. So, okay, survivors. We wanted survivors at our relay event. We had a survivor recognition lap. We had a survivor, medals, dinner, etc. But then it also became experiential. Not everything needs to be paid for or donated. So, for example, we had people, push wheelchairs for those that couldn't walk around the track. We had a special tent site that people could get if you, recruited 5 survivors to a team. Our more successful events, turn that into, okay, you recruited 5 survivors for your team. Here's your own special tent. You get a bed put in it. You get your own little porta potty put right outside your tent site, everything. You won't need to go anywhere. Some local work I'm doing with my church right now, it's how do we get people to come back to church since they've stayed away for the last year. We talked to a lot of different age groups, and we're finding that they want to have coffee and donuts now once the mask mandate's completely lifted. They want to have people babysit their kids because, their kids haven't been in church for a year. And so they're little, wild little heathens running around. So we're offering babysitting clinic, and so people can drop their kids off. It's the whole idea of what can we do to make it easier for people to participate. And that's either at a local event or if it's a nationwide incentive program, same kind of thing.
So I like that. Yeah, go ahead, Nichole.
You're good. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. I was saying, I like that you're showing incentives don't always have to be rewards for behavior, right? Or rewards for performance. It could be just trying to make it easier to participate. So, if your goal in your community is to get people to do X, then what can you do either as community manager or a leadership team to make it easier for them to do that, so that they don't, because the barriers to do that become a lot harder. I even think of things like when we plan events, we test with different days and times, because if you have an event for your community and people don't show up, you have to consider, okay, is it the topic or is it the day? Is it the time? And you have to adjust for that based on what you almost have to either talk to your community members and find out why they're behaving a certain way, and adjust to that, or you have to read between the lines. I remember talking to people in other communities in the real world, and they say, oh, well, people don't show up. They just don't want to do this anymore. I said, well, no, they don't want to do it the way it's being offered to them. So you've got to adjust, and you've got to change that. I love Brooklyn's example here, talking about the mission, networking, and skills development. She joined I joined my town's gardening group on Facebook, and one mission was to make sure my own yard is up to snuff. Number two, connecting with my fellow neighbors. That's right. And number three, she ups her gardening skills. So I like that, almost like a little exercise. If anybody else wants to do a quick little mission network skills for any community that you're a part of, feel free to post that. This could make some really cool content for the community later.
And also it can be something as simple as, my Ohio friends will probably appreciate this. The background, if you notice, is yellow. And I'm wearing a blue shirt today. And I told Jeff, I said, I don't want to do yellow because that's Michigan colors, blue and yellow. And being an Ohio State fan, and Jeff kind of rolls his eyes. And then he said, all right, if that makes you feel better about presenting and you're more comfortable and you're not looking at the background the whole time thinking, ugh, or anything like that, so next time he's going to make me a nice, pretty red one though. So thank you.
We'll do that. But that's talking to your community members, making sure that their needs are met, no matter how demanding they are.
Well, maintenance one are the worst, but that is actually a really great segue into the other part, like the second part of your question, Jeff, which was like the online.
Mm-hmm.
Like the motivators that are not tangible, and things like that, special backgrounds, right? Those become motivators. Looking at ways in the new world where we aren't seeing each other in person as much. I mean, the world is changing back to pre-pandemic a little bit, but this kind of thing is here to stay. So looking at opportunities on how you can, recognize and motivate people online digitally is really important too. Again, it's creating a red background for Julie. It's maybe doing shout outs on Zoom meetings, asking people to speak to things that they're experts on, giving them recognition in a different way is also really important this time now.
So I want to ask everybody, I didn't queue this poll up, but I'll ask everybody just to maybe type in chat or say something. But thinking of online recognition pieces, I think some of the most common things that most communities have are badges, right? Oh, you can earn a badge for this, wherever you can put that badge. Or profile filters, right? You have is it like on Facebook or Instagram or something? You have like the little addition to your profile that says you support a cause or you're a member of a community. But the first question to everybody is, one, do those still motivate you? And for how long? If they do you think that has an expiration date? Like, does it reach a point where, badges, I've got a couple, but it's over, right? Or the Facebook filters, So like, and if and when, so part two of the question, actually, I guess part three of the question is, what else would be a good recognition component for you as a member of a community virtually, right? So we talked about what could be offered. And I'm not talking about the cultivators community specifically. I'm talking about any community. What do you care about? Because I think a lot of community managers are probably asking themselves the same question: what is possible to offer? And also, what will be valuable to our community members? I guess something Molly and I had even talked about was, you support, like within the cultivators community, we want to support our cultivators members on their LinkedIn profiles, because that's a public, you want to recognize people in front of not just the community, but in front of their own sphere of influence outside the community. Because I think that's valuable to them.
Absolutely. I was going to say, on LinkedIn, you have the opportunity to endorse people, with one of their skills or anything like that. The other things I've seen is that, and we do this. I have large family and friends Snapchat group, and we'll just do shout outs and do like throwback Thursdays, but through Snapchat of something fun. And it just gives people a laugh, but it reminds us that, hey, we're all having fun together. So that's something completely different than even like a badge. And it's interesting because everything I've read on intrinsic motivation, and then what Dr. Moser told me yesterday is, if you look at it as it's a 3-year lifespan, before you have to up your game to make someone feel valued and important. Badges have been around for several years now. The design gets a little better, a little sharper, a little cutting edge, but they're still badges. And, we do everything from changing our background color to support something, or, change the filter, et cetera. But what are we doing to actually asking the people, how do you want to show yourself on Facebook? How do you want to show yourself on Snapchat, Instagram, whatever it is? And instead, we're the ones designing the programs, and we're not giving people the opportunity to be creative to design their own recognition.
So ask your audience. Oh, somebody go ahead.
I'm going to chime in real quick. It's Molly. I thought something that I'm really excited about that we've been doing, Jeff, a lot are those audiogram snippets, because I think in tandem with joining a community and hoping to get value from that community, I think individually we also want to provide value to that community. Like, that makes us feel good if, hey, I'm part of this community and I've provided value in some way. And something that's unique to our online world that's different from the pre-COVID era is, like, before we would go to conferences and we'd speak at conferences, and those would exist in those very individual moments. And maybe it's recorded, maybe it's not, but mostly that would just exist for the people there. And that's intimate and it's nice. And I'm excited for that to exist again. But what's cool about these online moments is that they can exist for much longer, and they can exist in small snippets, so that when you provide a value add or a point that really resonates with people, you don't have to be a designer, you don't have to be a video editor, but you can quickly cut that, you can put it in a cool Canva template, you post it on LinkedIn, and now that's something that people can like and share and interact with, and the person who you're highlighting or you're featuring can feel a sense of wow, okay, I said something valuable that this person now is sharing with their network, or this person is commenting on. And I think that is hugely valuable, and something that we'll do at the end of this event, and that we'll do at the end of all of our events, and something that you can take into your workplace and easily do with a meeting, or something that you do with your team on a regular basis.
I love that, Molly, because that's really integrating it into everyday life too, right? It's not just a one-off moment. It's something that can continue a teaching moment in some ways too.
They are the subject matter expert. They're quick, and it's not just shareable content. This is a term I learned years ago from another professional in the marketing space. You don't want shareable content, you want share worthy content. And those audiograms, Molly, I agree, those are share worthy. It's a very good point that somebody made that's worth hearing. And again, I like the fact that they're presented in a unique way that you can actually listen to it, you can see it, you can hear it, rather than just a meme. And then we tag everybody in it. So yeah, anybody who says something really wise on this call might become an audiogram. So in that interest, I will say, Savannah, you asked a question. I'm going to ask you to come on off of mute if possible, and maybe explain your question or ask your question a little more. So the question was, have you seen any creative examples of using the trend toward a culture of access versus a culture of ownership used in an incentive or a recognition capacity? So Savannah, I don't know if you're...
Can you hear me, Jeff?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. Yeah, I guess I was just curious if you've seen any of those cool kind of creative examples of kind of that tendency or trend towards being I don't know, compelled towards that culture of access. So like access to, different professional development opportunities, or just access to a different level of a connection with people, or even just like an access to like, oh, hey, for this set amount of time, you can use this thing or use this service or whatever it might be, rather than, hey, you get to own this thing. We're going to give you this thing and then you have it forever, and it might clutter up your house or whatever it might be, or you might not use it after a month or two. So kind of that trend, I feel like that's something that especially a lot of younger people, just in life in general, not just incentives and recognition, are kind of trending towards that culture of access versus ownership.
You are 100% correct, Savannah. That is actually a growing trend. And it's in our everyday life. Something as simple as if you go to college, you rent your textbooks now and you do it on or digital, and then they take it back 6 months later. It's the same kind of thing with motivation. It's what are we doing to unlock that next level? So it's like the whole, gaming. If you play a game and you keep unlocking levels, you get access to special things, and it makes you feel like you're the best gamer in the world until you find out your mom's also in the same level as you and she's 86. And then it's a little sketchy. But the
she
trend,
paid.
yeah, she did. So the trend is absolutely moving in that direction. It's what can we do to make people feel like they're part of an inclusive, secluded community that helps them gain something that someone else may not get. And you hit the nail on the head that it has to be short term, because it has to motivate someone to actually go do that action right away, because it helps you then on the back end collecting the data to determine, okay, this does work as a motivator, this does not work as a motivator, etc. But plaques, the coffee mugs, all that stuff, that's so 2010.
Hey, I like coffee mugs.
I'll add a quick
2010.
example.
I'm actually working on a real life example of that right now with an organization. And it's essentially, it's a national nonprofit. And the general idea is, and we're using that frame, earlier talked about, the 3 reasons people participate with nonprofits, or the mission, passion, and then networking and skill development. And we really pulled that skill development and networking components to build this. So their fundraisers, once they reach specific fundraising levels, they can unlock professional development opportunities that are only open to folks that meet that level. And it is some trainings, it is Zoom opportunities like this, it is some quarterly live events with some really some high level SLT members of corporations across the country. And I'm excited, we haven't quite launched it yet, but it is one of those things that we're looking at how, it's something you get from it after you've invested in us through your fundraising. We're going to invest back in you. And so it's kind of that give back, that without the thing opportunity.
It's aligning to the values of why they join and what the values of the community are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, was it Steve that was about to give an example?
Yeah, I was just going to add another quick example, and from a couple different levels. I mean, one I can think of in that terms of just sharing things and kind of access in that way is, I know in a lot of manufacturing environments pre-COVID, particularly manufacturing environments outside the US, you have employees who, don't make a lot of money. And so as part of their workplace community, a lot of these manufacturing sites have very intriguing benefits where they'll actually share access to lawn care tools and access to things to clean in your house and do different stuff like that. And it's your access to your workplace that's kind of helping you share just different things that are valuable to you in your life, or even just backpack giveaways when school returns and that kind of thing. An example in a more white collar kind of office setting is when I was leading a workplace community back in 2013. If any of you remember when Google Glass was coming out, and it was a bust, but when it came out, it was cool and people wanted access to it, right? And so I got early access to a couple of Google Glass devices. And we did this campaign, Don't Break the Glass. And it was, you had to submit ideas for like actual use cases at work that you thought would be interesting for Google Glass and how it could be used either in a surgical setting or in a manufacturing setting or whatever it is. And the very best submissions, we sent them the glass for a month for them to prototype and proof of concept. And then it kind of passed around the world and like 20 different people got to use it and do different things with it. And people were excited about that as a way to kind of say, here's this impact that I'm making in the community and here's the stuff I'm doing, right? And then maybe just one more real quick is one of the other big things we can give out in a lot of our functions, particularly if we're building workplace communities. Sometimes we're in a gift that we don't even recognize as a gift, which is just our title and our position in the organization. That maybe we're in some corporate function, we're in some sanctioned HR function, and we can give away some of that credibility to people just by saying, hey, I'm in an official company-wide program and I have this company-wide title and I have this thing. That like just giving away those titles and that credibility, for a lot of people, that means a lot to them, that they're just not the kind of random weirdo in their satellite office, but they're like endorsed by corporate. And I know Yanja, who's on the line, has run programs like that and others, but like sometimes what we can give away too is just some of that credibility.
You know, that is spot on. Very good points, all of them. And to the last one, you know, I read an article recently that talked about, you know, how hard is it to give even volunteers the opportunity and staff the opportunity to pick their own titles, you know, give them a bucket and whatever works within their community or within their area of expertise allows them to have some of that credibility. Like, for example, you know, I'm working with my local church, not very big, but I just remember sitting down the first day and the office manager saying, well, what do you want your title to be? I said, well, what do you mean? What do I want my title to be? And she said, well, what do you want it to be? And I said, how about Director of Community Outreach? She goes, love it. That's your title. So when you're talking to people about what they want to do, you know, and fundraising, et cetera, feel free to tell them that you volunteer for, you know, Otterville Parish and you are, you know, the Director of Community Outreach as a volunteer. So right away, I was like, woohoo, you know, look at me, I'm a director. But, you know, and it's something that's very easy to do because titles mean everything internally, more for pay grades and HR practices, but externally, it can really make you feel like you're part of something great. So Steve, that was excellent.
Right on script, Steve. Very good. All right, I'm going to shift gears for a minute. And I want to talk about, or at least in the context of structured programs for recognition or achievements and whatnot. And so it's kind of, we're talking kind of like you have these certain incentives that we have been talking about for the last 30 minutes. And those are more, you know, if you do what we want you to do, then you know, the performers get something out of it, right? The people who perform, where, you know, every community also has an opportunity for what, call it a structured program, maybe a recognition program of some sort for that every person's eligible if they achieve certain things. So a good example is, you know, you go to karate class, right? And you go and there's the white belt and then the yellow belt, green belt, and all the different belts. And almost everybody, you might not know the order of the belts, but you know that there's a hierarchy to the belts and that matches your expertise and or your achievements within karate. Or you look at the Girl Scouts and the badges that they earn, and if you have a sash with 1 badge and a sash with 12 badges, then you say, okay, well, that person has accomplished or made more achievements than the person with 1 badge. And so let's talk a little bit about the value of, like, why is that important to have alongside, say, like a performance-based incentive program?
So first off, I think I just want to say that everything you just laid out, the common ingredient is that everyone knows the expectations. They know the criteria. You know what you need to do to go from a white belt to an orange belt, you know, to blue belt, et cetera. You know what you need to do to earn your badges in Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. So it sets the level of expectations. So no one can say that, oh, they're getting special treatment or they're doing this because they donated X amount of dollars. It's because they worked hard, they met the set criteria, and they moved to the next level. Same with fundraising clubs. You know, fundraising clubs are fabulous, but not everyone can give $5,000, $15,000, whatever that is. So what are you doing to set the expectations of how you can still be rewarded and recognized? And, you know, and I'll never forget, second year I started working back in the 1900s. I had this little boy come into the office with his dad, and this the largest donation I ever received. When he gave me his little baggie and had 83 cents in it. And this kid was probably about 5 years old. And he just said, you know, my mom died last week from breast cancer, and this is everything that was in my piggy bank. And I want to give it to you because I don't want other little boy to lose their mom. And so if I, you know, right then and there, that kid should have had the biggest recognition and reward we had because of the intent behind it. And I think, you know, that it comes down to all of these recognition programs, whether it's through karate, Girl Scout, Boy Scout, etc. What's the intent and what's the expectations? And fundraising structured clubs or any of these clubs are good because they are structured, but you also have to leave a little bit of flexibility in there to help people motivate them to get to the next level. I think, you know, I touched on a little bit, levels the playing field, which is what you're trying to do because everyone comes in with the same expectations. Because I think without that, that's when you risk the disenfranchising of anybody that wants to be a part of your company or be a part of your community, et cetera. Nichole, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think maybe just expanding on it a little bit around, you know, creating that sort of structure and the expectation piece is really important. And a lot of the places I've worked with do it really successfully through story. There's a really great book called The Power of Myth. It's by Joseph Campbell. I don't know if anybody has read that book. But the book is about how as humans and as societies and culture around the world grew, we used myths to create social constructs for how people should behave, right? So if you think about like the Greek myths, for instance, it, you know, gave you examples like things you should do, things you shouldn't do, learn from these examples. And it really is like a code for how people should behave socially throughout civilizations. And I think if you can borrow moments from that to think about like, what are the social constructs you want to create in your motivation and incentivizing your internal champions? Like, what are those moments, the stories that people can connect to and understand that help them understand how to move from that A to B is also really helpful.
I think through that structure, or that construct, right, the community itself starts to almost create its own, it takes a life of its own, and it almost creates its own rules of engagement or acceptable behaviors even, right? And, you know, I think it reminds me of either like Survivor or, you know, Lord of the Flies, right? If you take a bunch of people, you put them on an island and you say, okay, here's a game and there's no rules.
Yeah.
But if you look 40 seasons later in Survivor, the contestants have created these unwritten expectations, social construct, these norms of behavior that if you behave this certain way, if you do this certain thing, that's out of line. But really, as far as the game's concerned, no, it's not. But it'll get you voted off, right? So within a community, you create some structure for everybody to participate in, and then around that structure, the community starts to build their own laws and expectations of behavior, and then they start to moderate themselves in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I suspect Brooklyn sees some of that in her gardening Facebook group. I mean,
right.
like it's probably because I belong to one too, Brooklyn. It like, you know, there's rules. You have to be a member. You have to, you know, no bullying, whatever, all of these things. But you see, the more you get on it, the rules motivate and change a little bit based on the community. And
I would imagine, Brooklyn, you have at least one person in the community with a ruler that goes out and measures the length of everybody's grass. The lawn.
Thanks for calling out her husband. Yeah.
Right. You don't want to be that guy. All right. So yeah, I like the idea of like pairing a structured program that levels the playing field. So no matter who you are and what you do, if you do X, you get Y. But then, as Julie and you said too, you have to accompany that with some kind of flexible incentive program that allows you to recognize people outside of that program, right? You can't say, oh, well, the 83 cents, we're going to give you the Bronze Club prize, even though you didn't meet the achievement. No, you have to give them a different type of recognition. So you have to have an avenue or a lane for subjective versus objective and rewards, right?
Yep.
Now, another way that communities can incentivize or motivate internal champions is through, and again, we'll use the nonprofit example. Nichole, you were one of the best I'd ever seen at the American Cancer Society for creating a volunteer, what we call a career path, right? Or if not creating it, then at least utilizing it to get the best volunteers to kind of escalate throughout the, from entry to exit of the community, right? Can you share a little bit about that, what that volunteer career path was for the college relay team, or the college relayers, and then maybe we can all kind of talk about how that could apply to any type of community.
Yeah. So a lot of my former colleagues are on here, so they know this, so I'll keep it short. But one of my previous roles was at the American Cancer Society, where I led the strategic direction for student engagement. So basically anybody elementary school through college fell into our team's bucket. And one of the things that I think we worked really hard on was to make sure that volunteers within the organization always felt like they had a place within the organization. And so we worked really hard to build ways that students at a very early age, elementary school, could participate in the mission of the organization through fundraising and activities and awareness, and then sort of graduate to the next thing as they aged. And me and my team built the infrastructure for it, we really took our cues from the volunteers themselves. And I think that goes back again to number one, right? The first thing we talked about, which is really understanding what the needs and wants are of the people that you're trying to serve. And we worked really hard to try to understand that, and then provide opportunities that fit those needs, but still met our needs as well. Because I think you can actually have a happy medium. You know, it doesn't have to be everything they want. It can be a combination of what your business and organization need, in addition to providing, something to those volunteers or people as well. But I think we looked at how we could engage them as leaders, as advocates, and then we provided a general structure and goals, and then allowed for a ton of flexibility within that structure, right? So we were not very prescriptive in the way we asked them to do things. There were certain expectations, but we really allowed for a lot of creativity and flexibility and empowerment in how they actually did the work and finished the job. And I think what we were able to do with that small group of people is those students graduated from college. They sometimes volunteered with us as young professionals, but many of them now work at the organization. Many of them have gone on to do great similar things for other organizations. And so it really built an affinity with the organization and the work to create a lifelong volunteer. And that was really, really important for us.
I think the other side of it too is you also had a path for community members to say, if you come in as a team member on a team, and then if you're really good and you're really interested in that, then you can become a captain, and then you can join the committee, and then you can become the chair, and then you become a regional leadership team member, state team member, division team member, national team member, national team lead. There's layers of hierarchy within the community that certain members could aspire to if that's something they're interested in and qualified for. And so I think a journey that's known to your community members, that if you want to achieve this, there's a path for this, and that maybe appeals to the skills development value for a community. And now, in the interest of time, I said we would have a discussion on it. Feel free to type your thoughts, everybody. But I really do want to get to recognition versus appreciation. So throughout this, we have talked about recognition and recognizing members for things. And we've talked a little bit about appreciation. Julie, hit us with impart us with your wisdom on what's the difference. If you know, there is a difference between recognition and appreciation. And both need to exist, but what's the difference?
So recognition is basically how do you reward outward performance? You know, that's that whole extrinsic value that we talked about earlier. And then appreciation is, you know, personal. It's gratitude. It's your intrinsic. And this just, you know, since we're doing book pitches, this is the great book, Drive by Daniel Pink. Talks all about extrinsic and intrinsic motivation and how if you don't have the intrinsic, which means if you're not showing people that you appreciate them, eventually you have no extrinsic recognition. So at the end of the day, if I say thank you in front of the whole company, is that appreciation or is that recognition? But if I call you up and I ask you to put your family on the phone and I thank them and tell them what a great job you are doing as a sibling, as a mother, as a daughter, son, whatever, and talk about the difference you're making in people's lives, is that recognition or appreciation? So everybody defines it differently, you know, which is always interesting. But at the end of the day, it's whatever makes someone feel good is what's going to drive them to perform to their highest capability. So incentive programs set it at the top of the hour that they work. They 100% absolutely work, but it's just a snapshot in time. So what are you doing to really make people feel like they're contributing to your organization?
I think the other side of it is appreciation is genuine, right? You can't fake it. It can't be a tactic or a strategy. It's got to be real. And I think that when it's real, the person that you're showing appreciation to understands that I'm seen, I'm heard, I'm valued, I matter in this community. My contributions matter. So I think that's a big key element that people understand. When you, as whether a community manager or a leader within the community, if you reach out to people and have conversations with them about what they're doing, it's got to be real. It can't be, you know, I'm checking a box because I had to, you know, keep the plate spinning, right? To keep Julie motivated. And then Nichole, you had with the college program, talking about people being seen, heard, valued, appreciated. Real quick, if you like, what's the story behind the shirts where you broke all the rules at the organization and let the students create their own shirts? Was that appreciation?
Yeah, I think
empowerment.
I think it's empowerment. I think it's appreciation. It's also in some ways a little recognition. So, you know, one of the things that for the whole program, everybody had to have the same shirt, and inevitably the shirt that was selected did not, the art on it did not appeal to a college audience. And we said this every year, nobody wants it, but everybody wanted a shirt, right? But not that one, because, and so one year we just made our own. And it was, you know, met a branding standards, it was appropriate, but it made them honestly feel a little special that they could break the rules and make something that actually got a lot of positive feedback from that audience. But ultimately, it also really empowered that market to feel like they actually had a voice and a say in something that they were participating in that was so much larger than them. So there's always opportunities to look for those kinds of moments, I think, in any business.
Yeah, you have to, right? I mean, any community, again, you join a community and you become an active member of that community because you want to be active. Being an active member means contributing to the direction of the community, where the community goes, what happens in the community. And so there has to be opportunities for the actual community members to make decisions that affect the community, right?
Right, because otherwise, what's the point, right? You're just there to just listen, and
then it's a newsletter.
That falls flat. It feels inauthentic, right?
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for attending this Cultivators community event. If you like this format, we'll produce more like it from the Cultivators community in the future. We will continue this conversation in the Cultivators community on Slack. I do hope everybody will join us next week, same day, same time, Tuesdays, 10 a.m. Eastern, for our next event in our Community Blitz series, where we're going to actually take a little bit of a break from the deep thought, and we're going to expand our minds and experience the value of social gathering within communities. Not every event in a community has to be some big, serious topic of discussion. Basically, we're going to experience a little bit of that social thing. We're going to play Jackbox games, everybody. That's what we're going to do. All right. You can RSVP to that event on LinkedIn. Molly, do you have that link? Can you post that in chat for everybody? If not, I can maybe try to do it and multitask. I do want to thank everybody for joining us today, and never stop changing.